That's where our next guest, that's where he works, in Baltimore. He's the editor-in-chief of Inside Lacrosse. He is Matt Kinnear as we get our way toward Final Four weekend. The women tomorrow and Sunday, the men Saturday and Memorial Day Monday. And Matt, thanks as always for coming on. We will talk about that, but the reason I texted you yesterday is because you kind of bombshelled our world yesterday afternoon with the news that Kayla Treanor was out the door and headed to Penn State, the first to report that news yesterday for Inside Lacrosse. How'd that all come together in your world, Matt?
Well, thanks for having me. And it wouldn't be May without talking about Syracuse, right?
No.
On the field, off the field, no matter what, Syracuse is always the star of May. So this year is certainly no exception. And, yeah, I mean, gosh, that happened quick. I think the takeaway is just, exactly that, there's no place like Syracuse when it comes to lacrosse, right? This move happens. Kayla tells the team, and next thing you know, the cell phone has so many text messages because everything is under the microscope at Syracuse, and it just kind of matters more. So this came together really quickly yesterday.
And obviously now Kayla heads out to Penn State. It's just one of these things, right? 4 years, and it's just unfortunate that it ends like this, or worse. I mean, had great success on the field, right? It fizzled a little this year against the toughest schedule in the country with a young team. But I don't think anyone would have predicted this 4 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. And look, Kayla is in the coaching ranks. There's so much potential and so much upside, and she's still so young and still has a whole career ahead of her. But I think this is certainly going to be one of the cases where both parties, Penn State and Syracuse, this is probably the best news for everybody, right? Mm-hmm. Kayla gets to go to Penn State, which look, she's not going to some program in the middle of nowhere. She's going to a Big Ten program. Certainly, they have some work to do to catch up to Northwestern, Johns Hopkins, and the like in that conference, and Maryland, of course, in that conference. But this is a program that within the past decade they've had a number one recruiting class. People want to go there. You can build there, and certainly, I think they've shown that they have the resources to make an offer to someone like Kayla Treanor. Mm-hmm. And for Syracuse, this is another fresh start here. There's no shortage of outstanding candidates to take this job. There's certainly a lot of noise around the program all the time because that's just what Syracuse lacrosse is, and that's just how much it means to the community. But this is going to be a fresh start there. Like you said, it was kind of an underperforming year. It was a year with some distraction. And it was it wasn't a team that was necessarily built to go to the Final Four, mm-hmm. Like two of Kayla's other teams were. So I think this is certainly one of those cases where both parties can look to the future a little brightly. And, I looked at Syracuse's press release that they announced after, all the news broke and Penn State made their announcement. And, I thought it was a little terse. I thought it was more celebrating what Syracuse lacrosse is mm-hmm. and not necessarily celebrating Kayla's accomplishments. And I think that speaks to just kind of, hey, what they think of the program, right? This is Syracuse lacrosse. We can command the best candidates in the sport to lead our program, and we're going to stick by who we are, and that's something that's pretty special.
Yeah, and I say this, we got Matt Kinnear, editor-in-chief of Inside Lacrosse. I've said this for years now, and unfortunately it still remains true from Syracuse's perspective. They're the best program in the country that has never won the national title. There's the Northwestern, there's BC, there's Maryland, there's Carolina. You'd line Syracuse up right behind any of them. So where does that lead them next here, Matt? Where do you think they turn in the search for the next head coach, who will be only the fourth in program history?
Wow, it's pretty crazy when you say that. It's only the fourth in program history. And again, I think that speaks to just a lot of the stuff that I've been saying. And, first you got to look at the people who are attached to the program in some way, right? And I think Michelle Tumalo has to be a candidate.
Absolutely.
The stuff what she's done at Army, the way that, Army is a place that obviously you've seen the men's team this year and what they accomplished, and the women's team this year. They certainly have a tradition in lacrosse, even though the women's program is new. But they have their own challenges. And, if she can do that with the challenges that, and there's opportunities too, but if she can do that with the challenges that the Army program faces, imagine what she can do with Syracuse. And then, I think of Katie Rowan Thompson. Obviously it's someone who, is arguably, she's certainly on the very short list of all-time greats at Syracuse. And again, that's another thing where she's done tremendous things with, less resources. She's become the big fish in her pond. And go to a place like Syracuse where you can command the best recruits in the country and the best resources and facilities and all of that. There's certainly a lot that you can do. And obviously, I think the name that everyone has kind of talked about on social media is Joe Spallina.
Right.
And, he's done tremendous things at Stony Brook. He's basically had success at every single level of the game, and this is including, youth club ball. This is including professional. This is including international. This is including women's and across men's and across different disciplines of the sport. And, presumably he brings along the number one recruit in the country with him. Obviously, that's not a sure thing, I would say, but it's certainly a pretty good possibility. And everyone who is in the Dome certainly knows the Spallina last name by now. Reggie Thorpe's got to be someone that you consider. Obviously, someone else with close ties to the program. And I think the coaching job that I've been most impressed with this year is Katrina Dowd and what she's done at Brown. So those are certainly some really big names. And Syracuse is a place that no matter who they call, they're going to pick up the phone and listen to it.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, Matt. My Twitter mentions in the last 24 hours, it's just been filled with Joe Spallina, over and over and over and over again. And there's no doubting Joe's a great coach. Like he's won a ton of games. Obviously, his son has done quite well here, and his daughter Alexa is the number one incoming recruit in the country, who was once verbal to Syracuse at this time a year ago. Also, 12 and a half months ago, he and the Syracuse administration got into a massive fight at the quarterfinals the second round of the tournament about field conditions. I don't know. I can't imagine people hiring a guy that they were just yelling at a year ago, but who knows, right, when it comes to things like this.
Exactly. It's look, Joe will speak his mind no matter what, whether that's good or bad. He certainly, he's certainly not one to shy away from any sort of, whether it's confrontation or speaking his mind. But really, the name of the game is winning, right? Yeah. And he demands a lot of the people around him, the people the institutions that he works for, and the people that play for him. Certainly, I think there'd be a level of awkwardness when that phone call started, but it's certainly something to consider, right?
Absolutely. I mean, he wins a lot of games. That is the one you can't argue that. He wins a ton of games down on the island at Stony Brook. And, Syracuse is also very unique in this way because there's nowhere else in the country where the most successful coach in the history of the women's program is now, coaching the men's program and is the Michael Jordan of the sport in Gary Gait. How much influence do you think Gary wields in determining who the next head coach of the women's team is?
Look, I think he has to have tremendous influence into this. Certainly, he knows he knows the young women in this program as much as anybody. He did tremendous work building this program to where it is, and he's one of the great minds in the sport. And I think so much of the culture of Syracuse revolves around Gary, men's and women's lacrosse, and just athletic department wide. Gary is just this figure that I think has shaped so much of what people believe about Syracuse and kind of the mentality and I hate this word, but just the vibe around Syracuse. And you certainly have to listen to him. And look, he's one of the great minds, men's, women's, it doesn't matter, the great minds in the sport and greatest people in the sport.
Vibe is an overused word these days. Not with Gary. Gary is 100% a vibe. That dude he's vibe all day long. Let me float one other name past you, and it's the coach that actually knocked Syracuse out of the tournament this year, and Erica Bamford from Yale. She's from here, went to CBA down the road from here. Would that be a name you toss in the mix? I met her a few years ago when she was at a local Hall of Fame induction, and she just had a great energy and presence about her, I thought.
Yeah, super impressive. You look at Yale, and look, Yale is not one of these programs that, it's sustained success by this point. It was certainly a progression that took many years. to get there, but I think that just shows her ability to build a foundation based on culture, which I think you need. And then, you stack good recruits and better players and better resources on top of that, and great things happen. And look, she's one of those, she's a coach that I think is going to push you hard, but she's going to push you to the success that you want. And that's what these top-end recruits want. They want to be pushed to be as great as they can be. And Coach Bamford is certainly someone who will do that.
Yeah, she was just really enjoyed her presence when she went into the Central New York Lacrosse Hall of Fame. I think that was 2-3 years ago at this point. We got Matt Kinnear, the editor-in-chief of Inside Lacrosse, with us. And as you said, Syracuse always seems to do something to steal the spotlight this time of year, but there's kind of some really big games coming up starting tomorrow in Foxborough. First off, your thoughts, Matt, on it all being at one site this year. It feels like long overdue to me. What's your sense of how this all plays out with all the games being at Gillette this weekend?
I absolutely love it. And when it happened the last time, it was 2017. It was also at Gillette. And, that was another circumstance where the tournament was supposed to be in North Carolina, but due to some, political, boycott of NCAA events in the state of North Carolina, they ended up getting lumped in together. And it was one of those happy accidents that I think everyone looked around and said, oh, this is what the sport needs, right? Mm-hmm. As you know, this is a community where it's close-knit. There's going to be men's players and women's players. There's going to be brothers and sisters. There's going to be, moms and dads, going one way or the other, and just having them all in one spot really just makes sense. And it's a celebration of the sport. And look, the last time the women's Final Four and the men's Final Four were together, the women's game has skyrocketed since then. We saw the attendance record at Johns Hopkins. That was just, the atmosphere there for that championship weekend was just so great. So, I don't look at it as, the women's game is piggybacking on the men's game. I look at it as the women's game is going to add rocket fuel to the men's game because women's lacrosse is just so hot right now. People want to see it. People want to be there in person. And, they deserve that big stage, and they deserve it all together because we're all lacrosse fans. I know the sports sometimes seem foreign to each other with some of the rules being different and even, the sticks looking different. And
you there, Matt? Did we lose Matt? Matt Fanner? I think we have to give Matt a call back. Where did he go? There he goes. We'll give Matt a call back. I feel he was about to say something very insightful. When we get him back on the line here, we're going to ask him about the games on the field this weekend. Carolina's undefeated, number one in the country for the women. They had just an insane amount of ACL injuries last year, in that none of their players had functional ACLs by the end of the year, and they are on a full-stop revenge tour this year with BC and Northwestern in the other semifinal. We'll see if he thinks Syracuse has another chance. All right, I think we got Matt back here. Let's move on to the games here, Matt. Carolina, I mean, everyone's finally healthy for them this year on the women's side of things. Clear favorite to you, or how much chance are you giving Florida, Northwestern, or BC this weekend?
Certainly the favorite, but it's not going to be an easy road for anyone. Even Florida. This past weekend, I thought they showed, this past Thursday, I thought they showed tremendous moxie with. They went big on Duke, but then they had to face that adversity of a team coming back at them. Certainly, I think North Carolina has a pretty clear edge in the semifinal game. It won't be easy, but they will have the edge. The winner of Boston College Northwestern, I'm not going to say it's a toss-up, but I'm going to say that's going to be a battle